Hello, everyone. It is great to see the Zoom populating as you come in. Welcome to our third and final formal part of the Knitalong in terms of like teaching and that. Next week, we will, of course, be showing off your finished Gnoddies and handing out prizes, which is really exciting. So the prize form is now open, and I have linked it on the Ravelry page, but not yet on the main landing page. I will put that link into chat right away, as well as links to some other videos that I think you might want, and I'll explain why and when as we get into those. But they are, I have made an assumption that for most people, and the vast majority of people, Gnoddy will not be their final gnome. And so I have not necessarily covered some super basic points. However, if Gnoddy is your first gnome, or you want some review of some super basic points, I have links for you to other videos. So I'm going to pop all that in chat right now, and then I'll pop the videos in chat again later because people are obviously just joining in. So we'll do this more than once. If you wanted to give me a minute to post that, and then we will. Where's my thing here? Here we go. Okay. So here is the link. Let's start first with a link to the form for entering prizes. And then, so that's the first one. Can I pin it? Nope. Can I? Nope. Okay, I can edit it, then I can delete it, but I can't pin it. So I've put the form link in. I will post it again. I'm also going to post it on the landing page. It's already on Ravelry. I will also put it on Instagram. Let me just actually put that in my to-do list for today. Link on web page and Instagram. Okay, so then I'm also going to pop in a couple of um, tutorial links for some more basic things. I'll mention them and link them again later. Okay, so welcome everyone. I love seeing where everyone's from. We've got Montreal and Frankfurt and Netherlands and Arizona, Minnesota, Oregon, Alabama. It's a good, well-rounded group. Let me just check if I do this. Okay, here we are. So it's also a holiday in the States. So I know that a bunch of people will not be joining us today. I notice our numbers are considerably down from other weeks, but I think that's just everyone's barbecuing kind of vibe that might be happening. So I don't mind. That's one reason why we record these and then make them available afterwards. So what we're going to be talking about today is I'll be answering any questions you have, period, but we are going to go through, and so we've knit the hat. We've knit our sleeves, and now we need to pick up, and we've knit our sweater. We need to pick up from the hem, and we'll go into that in a little detail. We will stuff and talk about stuffing the arms for Gnoddy, and we will talk about knitting very few stitches in the round and the fringe beard, and then assembly. And I just realized that two of those four videos I don't have pulled up. So we may have a moment or two of silence while I do that and quickly scavenge among my own file tree. But we should be pretty fast on that. The videos that I am linking that I am not sharing is, so when I talk about Gnoddy stuffing, I talk about a few things that are specific to Gnoddy, but I don't go into stuffing fundamentals. So I've got a basic video in my gnome schooling playlist on YouTube where I go into what kinds of stuffing methods there are, or stuffing types there are, and then how you would use them to stuff a toy. Gnoddy is small enough that she's kind of not going to go wrong for you. The bigger the gnome, the more important it is to stuff evenly into a toy. I talk about how to insert the stuffing and sort of spread it out so that you're stuffing in thin layers rather than big chunky clumps. So that's one of the videos I linked. I also linked a how to deal with ends video. In the assembly video, I quickly tie a couple of knots and talk a little bit about how to to deal with ends. But if you're struggling with knowing how to deal with the end at the bottom of Gnoddy or after we do the beard and the nose, and you want it to be a little more like slowed down and broken down, that will be in the dealing with ends video. And then the other one I talk about is blocking gnomes. As a largely stockinette gnome, usually they don't need a lot of blocking, but I think with Gnoddy's hat, some people were struggling a little bit with the hat being a little opinionated. I think opinionated hats are fun, and especially once stuffed, a lot of times the pressure from within kind of evens out what's going on in the brim and the ear flaps. But if you would like to block your gnome, obviously do that before stuffing. And I have a video where I talk about both steam blocking, which you can do after stuffing. So if you get to the end and you're like, ah, this feels a little rumpled, I think she'd look a little prettier, a little more like the stitches got all even and sort of settle into themselves if I steamed it. So I talk about how to steam um, gnomes, and I also talk about how to do a wet blocking, which is what you would do. Usually I do it after this pearl ridge that we add there. I will get to that point, and then I will block my gnome. And so if you're new to blocking on the needles, I cover that as well in that video. So those are the three things that I'm not going to be covering in video form today that you would go off and watch on your own. But if you have questions related to that, absolutely go ahead and ask me those. So we're in a sort of a low knitting week. If you think about it, it's just this little bit, some stuffing, and then this and this to knit and then assemble. But this nose is um, emblematic of one of the things that in knitting, sometimes with gnomes, we have to deal with very few stitches in the round. And especially when you start with very, very few stitches, it can be quite hard and it can feel like you're terrible at it. And there are some tips. So I have a video, it's already posted on YouTube, but that's one of the ones that we will play today. And it's like 7 tips for knitting very few stitches in the round. And I called it that because there's definitely pieces of advice that just apply to everything, whether it's like knitting naughty sleeves or other places where you're knitting very few stitches. Or like a pinhole, like a cast on for a hat or something like that when you're starting top down. Um, but it's stealthy. I mean, I could have just called it um like knitting gnome noses tips video because it's basically the video I made to help people with gnome noses that are knit in the round rather than say I-cord or some of the other techniques. But I didn't want to just limit it to that. But I do wonder if people who are looking for a gnome nose tutorial are then not noticing it and bypassing it. So you never know how to label things on social media and YouTube. So if you're looking for it, it's not called Gnome Noses. It's called 7 Great Tips for Knitting Very Few Stitches in the Round, I believe. Um, and I will, those are, that's already online. And we will play it here though, because I think it bears repeating. Even if you're new, you've been gnoming, you may find some of the tips in there useful. So before we get going, does anyone have a question just right off the bat before we get into the videos? If you do, you can tap your screen and raise your hand, or you could just unmute and go for it because we don't have so many people here, but that might be a problem. I'm gonna keep waiting. Mary Ellen, the Google form, Mary Ellen should just, I should have just posted it. Should be linked at the top and posted. If I didn't actually hit post, go ahead and post it for me. But I think Ravel, we were good. That's the one spot I got to before the Zoom, it was Zoom o'clock for me. Okay, so it sounds like we're going to launch in. And oh, before I do that, heads up, just first thing, the prize entry form is open. It will be open until I wake up on June 1st. Now, like technically it says till May 31st. But what's going to happen is because of time zones and stuff, and the fact that I turn into a pumpkin at 10 p.m., I will go to bed and people will still be entering. If you can put a gnome entry into the form, you can do that. As soon as I wake up, I will close it. I will randomly choose winners and we will move on with our day. That is the day, June 1st, where I will be announcing the prizes on the Zoom. So that's a week today. And those are all done randomly. And so that's the deal. You've got between today and a week today, like in the morning sometime, to enter. And if you make more than one Gnoddy during May, you could enter more than one time. That's not true for the Year of Gnomes. The Year of Gnomes, we cap it at one entry per month so that that's not a contest for like who can knit the most tiny gnomes or whatever. But if you can make multiple Gnoddys, you can enter for the Gnoddy knit-along prizes more than once. All right. If there's questions on that later, we'll get back to that. But in the meantime, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up stitches from Gnoddy's hem. That would be the next place we left off. So we had done, we had knit the sweater, bound off, and now we're doing the ends. So, or not the ends, the pickup. So let's go for that. Sweet. Before I begin, Marcy B, I see you on the screen. Can you give me a thumbs up if you heard the sound on the video? Okay, good. Yeah, no, I've paused it now. Okay, so you did hear some sound from the video, and that's the main thing. No, not at all. Okay, let me try hit playing again. Lisa Smith, I can also see you. So if you guys could give me thumbs up if you hear what I'm about to hit play again.
Self here is formed by making a sweater that is picked up and knit from underneath the hat.
Okay, so Lisa, you couldn't hear that, but Marcy could. Oh, that's confusing.
Sarah, so I could hear it playing at your end, but it's just a blank screen right now. Not even a video is coming up.
Oh, it sort of started black, but there should be something on it. All right, I'll back up
Okay.
to the beginning. Now it should be a black screen. I know because there's a bit of a time delay. So it should now be a black screen. I'll hit play from the beginning. And Lisa, if you don't ever get a black screen or get away from black screen, let me know and we'll see what we can do here.
Gnoddy's sweet self here is formed by making a sweater that is picked up and knit from underneath the hat.
Yeah, just black screen still.
Up and knit.
Oh, wait. Okay, I selected the wrong video. I have two videos open and I can see the green share screen box around the wrong video. So I opened two files. Oh, I'm so glad we did this. And I figured this out because that would be a very unhelpful. There we go. Okay. Ah, I can see everyone perk up as that popped up. Every face I can see just got a little happier. So let's go.
Gnoddy's sweet self here is formed by making a sweater that is picked up and knit from underneath the hat, and then a body that is picked up and knit from underneath the sweater. So that's what we're going to work on right now, is just a quick pickup tutorial for this part of Gnoddy. So we've placed a stitch marker, and the stitch marker will be at the center back of our gnome here. We're going to roll everything back, and we're going to go, and it's not absolutely important that you get this stitch versus this stitch. It's really not that important for this part of the gnome. But what we're going to do is we're going to go along and we're going to pick up at the top of the ribbing here. So the row where we transition, and the figure in the book actually does a really great job of showing what we're going to be doing. So we have the little ribbed bits here. So these are sort of the knit ribs. And you can see at the top of that, there is a cap. And then there's sort of two smiles underneath. So we're going to be picking up the red marked stitches here along the whole thing of the ribbing. And so we're going to be working along the top, but there's really no wrong way to pick up stitches. So don't get too stressed out. If we take this as our starting place and we go next to it, you can see this is, I mean, it's very short in this example. So we've got our short little bit of ribbing, and this bit right here is my cap. The knit ribs are going to be really easy. If I were skipping and we did it like this, it'd be nice and easy. But in between, we've got a purl, and so that's what we need to do next. So if this is my knit cap, and this is my knit cap, then in between, we've got one in right here. But again, don't stress about getting this perfect. If you wander a little bit between, it's not going to be the end of the world. So here's my knit cap at the top of or my cap at the top of there. So then this will be my purl. This will be at the top of my knit rib. And we'll just keep going along, picking up, try to pick up in roughly the same place. And if you pick up from the top down, your stitches will be oriented so that the right leg of the stitch is in front, and that way they won't be twisted. If you're picking from the bottom up, your stitches will be twisted, and if you then knit them like that, your pickup row could get very, very tight and inflexible. So that's just something to keep a track of. If you have a stitch that's knit or picked up from the bottom up, then I'd be knitting those from the through the back loop, and that will untwist them. If you have an untwisted stitch and you knit it through the back loop, that will twist it. But if it's already twisted, that actually untwists it. So we're just going to go around and we'll pick up all along here. The variegated yarn is making it a little more tricky for me to see what I'm doing. People usually get intimidated about picking up stitches because there's a ratio. It's something like every 3 out of 4, and then on this part of the sweater, it's every 2 out of 3. But the nice thing about gnomes is almost every situation in which we're picking up stitches, we're picking them up at a 1-to-1 ratio, and then you can fudge it on the next round. If you need to decrease or increase to get the right stitch count, you can. So that's always nice about gnomes, is that they are forgiving that way. So just get roughly the right number of stitches onto the needle, trying to pick up above the ribbing so that the ribbing is sort of flapping free and really gives the impression that Gnoddy is made of or is wearing a sweater rather than made of sweater. If you leave this marker here, the one that we placed to give ourselves a landmark to know where to knit, pick up and knit, you can just leave it and then it will function as a beginning of round marker too. Having picked up our stitches, now we will knit. If you haven't noticed, I often separate picking up from picking up and knitting. I think it's easier to do them separately. Some people find it easier to do it together, and I encourage you to be the boss of your own gnome and your own knitting. So now we join our body yarn and we work a few rounds, and then we will start closing it up and then stuffing, which is the next step, where we'll have a little something to talk about.
How do I close this? Oh, I think I have to stop sharing. Okay, so one thing I will note is that with the small yarn size and then the variegated yarn, exactly where I was picking up was not so visible in the video. So one of the videos that I'd like to recommend for you is the video I filmed for the gnome schooling playlist where I talk about picking up stitches from gnome hats, because most of my hats begin with ribbing and then we pick up on the inside and knit the body down. And I did that video in worsted weight. And so it has the same thing. There's a ribbing and then the transitions to stockinette. And so in terms of giving you the visual, that one is the same tips, but on bigger yarn with bigger needles. And it's not variegated. So I'm going to pop that in chat now so that that is an option for you. So that is the video. Okay. Sounds like I'm not sharing sound and what you're hearing is from my computer. Okay, this is a problem I've had in past videos. Just give me a moment here. There is something in my settings. Oh, where was it? It has something to do with the audio settings. Give me a minute. Might be in my meeting settings. Just give me a minute, guys, because obviously it's important to get that for you. Hmm. Someone helped me find this the last time I had this problem. And so let me see. It's usually a button to click when you hit share screen. That might be it. I might need to remember to do that. Okay, we'll try the next one and we'll see about that. Okay, so I'm sorry if you couldn't hear the audio. Basically, I reminded people that it's just a one-to-one ratio of picking up, and that there's no wrong way to do it as long as you get roughly the right number of stitches on. If you change exactly which round you're in a little bit, that's okay. You can increase or decrease down the first round or right after the first round. Maybe just knit everything and get all those on the needle in the new yarn and then change your stitch count. As long as you're close, you can fudge it pretty easily in these transition rounds, especially because with us knitting underneath ribbing, it won't even be visible. The ribbing will flop down over top and cover up any stitch count changes you need to make. All right, were there questions about that? If so, you can type it in chat or just unmute and talk or raise your electronic hand by tapping your screen and finding the react option. And I just like to pause for a moment because typing takes a while and so does finding everything. So I think they did a study once that the average teacher waits like 1.3 seconds after asking, does anyone have any questions before moving on? And that's really almost not enough time for someone to think, do I have a question? How would I phrase the question? Am I going to raise my hand? Oh, the moment's passed. That is like way past that. So I like to really draw out my waiting for questions, often by giving that exact anecdote because it uses a lot of time. Anyways, it looks like we're good for the moment. And I will attempt now to share my screen. Yes, share sound. See? Thank you. Who was that? Beth, you are my hero. Okay. So now we're going to talk about stuffing Gnoddy. So it'll start off as a black screen and hopefully be far less muffled and just brilliant.
Not too far into the body, it's time to stuff the arms. They're a little awkward to get into because they are so narrow, and so it's a good time to stop and stuff them before things start to close down too much here at the top. Well, the bottom, I suppose, of the gnome. So I really suggest that you use a pencil with an eraser on the end. The eraser acts as a grip, and rather than sliding through the stuffing, we'll kind of grab onto the stuffing and push it. So definitely start with a very small amount. You don't want to overstuff them or they will become very stiff and they won't bend well. So then just take your pencil and you can reach in really nicely when the gnome is this open. And so one of the things I would suggest you think about is whether you want your Gnoddy to have sort of upright arms or arms that you can bend down. So what I did in the difference here is I stuffed it roughly even all the way through the upper body, whereas here I stuffed the arms and the body, but I actually went with my finger and my thumb here and I kind of made a shoulder joint by making it empty in that shoulder. Well, not quite empty, but I pulled almost all of the stuffing out by kind of mushing it around. And you don't have to decide that now, but when you go to stuff the body, you do need to make that take that into consideration. Do you want these up or do you want them down? This Gnoddy I actually sewed, so you can see I sewed it right here and a little bit along the upper arm, and then this one spot here on the hand, and then I just sewed this whole one down because I wanted to show in the book how you could really change the look of the gnome just by changing the arm position. You can do a lot with shaping from the outside with the fingers that aren't actively stuffing. Especially with really narrow places, it's a good idea to start with less stuffing than maybe you think you're going to need, and you just go slowly. It's difficult to get it back out, and so you don't want to pack it so tight in there that it's going to be really difficult for you to try to get out of there. So just stuff both arms up to about the shoulder joint, and then you can go on with your decreases and work the rest of the gnome as normal. I will link in the video the regular stuffing advice that I give for gnomes. All right, there we go, bit by bit. Gnoddy's coming into focus. We'll get there in the end. I will say the moment you start to stuff beyond the sleeves, Gnoddy really starts to look good. There's something about this design that looks a bit dodgy till you do start stuffing. I wanted to just say that Gnoddy is a pattern that really does benefit from a steam blocking. If you don't want to do a wet blocking, that's totally fine. If you're going to wet block, obviously wet block before you stuff the sleeves. But I think even just a steaming will help her always settle in. I find that sometimes the hem of the sweater wants to flip up a bit and the ear flaps can be a bit unruly, although maybe you will like that. So do consider whether or not a steam will help her settle into herself and just come to her full gorgeousness. And don't be surprised if the second you stuff, it starts to really look adorable. Let's assemble Gnoddy so that we can finish. I think Gnoddy's assembly video might be the fastest one I ever make. There's so little left to do.
All right, I'm going to pause that one because we haven't finished the nose and the beard yet. So we'll come back to that one in just a moment. All right, and this is where I need to rummage around and find those videos. But first, I want to ask if there are any questions about that general stuffing and the idea of blocking. This is me patiently waiting again for questions and checking up there. If you're wondering why my eyes are kind of moving around, I'm looking at chat and I'm looking at the top because people who do want to come or who press the electronic raise hand thing, they pop to the top of my screen on the on this. So that's why I'm kind of, my eyes might be flittering around, but it's just because I'm trying to check in with everybody. So I'm going to now take a moment to pull up the video on both the beard and the nose, and then we will watch those before we assemble, because obviously we can't sew things on that we haven't made yet. I will note that Else put in chat that they put a pipe cleaner and they use it from arm to arm. So a lot of gnomes, that's a little tricky, but Gnoddy's actually ideal for that. So if you put a pipe cleaner all the way across, like in a T, you would then be able to actually pose the arms and get very awesome articulation out of that. And so you could stuff around that, or depending on the size of your pipe cleaner, it might be just enough. So pipe cleaners and Gnoddy are super compatible. It's a little harder with the ones where we're putting them on I-cord because it is possible people there tend not to use pipe cleaners. Then it would just be like floral wire in through the I-cord across the body and then down there. Or some people even just do in the I-cord. You can slip the wire down the center of the I-cord and then have posable arms so everyone can walk like an Egyptian. All right, let me pull up that video. Let's do the nose first. No, that's here we are. Where'd that go? Might take a moment to pull it off the cloud for me here. Just let's see what's going on. That's why I usually pull all the videos up because when they're stored on the cloud, they're not always like right here available for me in the background. Is it hiding on my desktop? Let me just go rummage around here. I've got so many tabs open or programs open.
It was muted.
Let's
Just waiting for her to speak to see if it's unmuted.
No,
it doesn't
I can
make
hear
a
someone
difference.
talking. Am I muted for somebody?
Okay.
Okay. I'm looking for a file to show everybody. So I'm just sort of not being very chatty. So I'll get there in a minute.
Locking it?
Pardon? Okay. I'm just gonna mute everybody again. Let's see. Open. Oh, okay. That is open. No. I don't like playing them on YouTube because I can't open them full screen when I do that. I like to do it through my computer. but for reasons I do not understand, it is just not opening this file for me, even though it says it opened it at 12:30 p.m., which is right now. Oh, I can see what's happening. Okay, we're just going to wait a moment. And it is, in fact, downloading itself from the cloud, which is why I like to do this ahead of time. So we'll just wait a moment. It may make my internet a little dodgy as I'm chatting as well. So if I'm stuttering right now, the good news is once this is uploaded, it will stop doing that. And then we can play it. Okay. So the knitting very few stitches in the round is a frustrating thing. You will be good at knitting, and then you will try this and you will not feel good at knitting if this is something that is new to you. So this is definitely one of those things where, as an adult learner, you have to remember that part of being a learner is starting things that feel awkward. We expect kids to feel awkward a lot of the times in their lives, and then once we get to be adults, we only like to do things where we're feeling comfortable. But doing some things will be uncomfortable till we get till we find how to be comfortable, till we find the little skill tips or the little modifiers for the way we hold our needles might shift when you're only casting on, like 3 stitches in the round or something super irritating like that. And as a designer, I work very hard to avoid ever having to say that, but there's certain parts of a toy where it's just that's the way of it. We have to start small because the toys have to get small. There's not a lot of ways for some pieces to be formed. It's just the one in, and then that's our only choice. So we're almost fully loaded for this video, and then we will play it. Yeah, I love the way a big nose looks on a little gnome. So there is in the book a small nose and a big nose. And the small nose is the one I designed for Noodles, Noodles being the very small gnome. Let me find my little Noodles here. Okay, so here's one of the noodles I knit last winter when I was just like bored. Okay, so this one is actually done with I-cord, and you don't have to do a lot of the, like, start with very few stitches and then increase and stuff and then decrease and then deal with the end. The small nose, for those of you who are really struggling with Gnoddy, is definitely an option. This is a very plump DK weight. And so the nose would be quite a bit smaller done in fingering weight. You could hold the fingering weight double or do a DK weight version of the same nose just to get a bigger, chunkier look without having to knit so few stitches in the round. You can just do a nice simple I-cord approach. It's actually very similar to the way that we do the hands and the bauble on the hat. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm trying it and it's not working, you can definitely substitute noses, which is one of those weird things I get to say in my professional life. You can substitute noses. All right, my video has finally loaded up from the cloud onto my desktop, and we can now share that video. So let's talk about 7 hopefully great tips, because we've been waiting for them, for knitting very few stitches in the round. And I have clicked share my sound this time, so we're going to be good. All right.
Let's talk about knitting very few stitches in the round. A number of my patterns have parts where we are going to be casting on 3 or 4 or 5 stitches and then needing to work them. And a lot of people struggle with that, and so I'm going to put together some of my favorite tips. This pattern starts at the tip and increases out, and so we're starting with just 3 stitches up at the top here for Natasha from Never Not Gnoming. Whereas here, for one of my more common noses, we start with 4 stitches and increase out, and that's a little tricky. So my first tip is to look at your materials. If your needles are very slick, like these zings, they may be the worst needles you can choose. So pay attention to whether they're too slippery and they keep wanting to slide out. When we have lots of stitches on the needles, that wider base kind of keeps this flat. But if we have very few stitches on the needles, it can wobble a lot. And if it tips and it's heavy and slick, it will slip right out. So first of all, check your needles. It might not be you that's struggling, it might be your needles. So try out wood, bamboo, or carbon fiber needles. They have a really good grip. They're also often lighter than metal needles, and that helps too. My second tip is to think about what cast on you're using. Here I've got the backward E cast on, which is a very simple and common one, often the one people are taught first, but it is a very narrow, sort of flimsy cast on, whereas something like the long tail cast on it's a full row of stitches. So it has the full cast on, and then it's as though you've knit that first row because you've got purl bumps all the way across the back here. So the reason I'm suggesting this is that it has a little more stability and a little more heft. But also, if you look at how visible that twist is, it is easier to tell on a heftier cast on if you have twisted your stitches. The subtlety of this, now that I'm pointing it out, won't seem so subtle, but if you're working in the round and you're working between needles and whatever, this isn't going to be as obvious to you as this big thick ridge that your fingers will hit and know, oh, that shouldn't be there. So that'll help you stop twisting the stitches, because that is fairly common with people who are casting on very few stitches in the round. They kind of can get a little twisted because there aren't enough stitches to really build up that visual pattern. So think about your cast on. The next tip is to use I-cord. So if you have 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches, rather than dividing them and working either over magic loop or DPNs, you can just knit as I-cord until you get too many stitches. For me, I would say that 8 stitches is the borderline where I feel okay. I will knit 8 or 9 stitches for a couple of rounds as I-cord, but after that, I don't. You'll need needles with open ends, so you can't do this on straight needles, but you can do it on DPNs or circulars. You're going to slide the stitches over. You'll work across them, just knitting as normal. And then, rather than turning, you just slide across. And because the yarn is coming from the leftmost stitch, and you're going to knit the rightmost stitch, this will form a circle. You're going to have the knitted stitches and then the yarn, and it will create a circle, and it won't be as apparent as you work the first bit, but you can see it building up as you go. I've got a whole video on I-cord, which I will link in the description. And as you can see, that's building up a little bit of a circle. It's a nice tube of knitting. Now, it's very rare that you would need to knit 3 stitches in the round without being told to work I-cord. So what would usually happen would be something like cast on 4 stitches, and then you'd start increasing right away for, say, something like a nose. So in this one, I can start the first few rounds in I-cord and work the pattern as written, but doing I-cord. So let me show you what that would look like. So the first round of the pattern has you cast on 4 stitches, and then you knit front and back into every stitch and increase to 8. So what I would do is I would knit front and back all the way across as though I'm working in I-cord. So now I'm at 8, so I could knit the next round plain, let's say, and I could work that round as I-cord. And the nice thing about working the first few rounds as I-cord is that once you have a few rounds on the needles, the stability of the knitting that you have made helps your needles work better and not be so flippy when you then go to divide. So you could either divide for working in the round on magic loop at this point, or for working on DPNs. I always like to have half of this, if it's a very low stitch count, I always like to have half of the stitches on the front, and then split the remainder on the back 2 needles for DPNs. So this is what it would look like. After I've worked the first few rounds in I-cord, I then would divide, and then in the pattern in the next round would have me increasing again. So then I would just be able to work in the round from that point. But I've got a nice stable base that makes it a little easier, and my needles aren't flipping around too much, although they still do want to do that. And when you divide to work in the round after having done something like that, just remember to stop and pause. Whether you're working magic loop or off DPNs, the yarn will be coming from the last stitch you knit, so that is the last stitch in the round, and you want it to be next to the first stitch in the round. So this has got to be my first stitch, and so we just want to have all of that with sort of the right side out and the wrong sides facing in, and then I can work across and work the increases for my next round. So you can start an I-cord and give yourself at least a little base that's going to grab onto those needles and keep them from flapping around. Your next option is, instead of working I-cord to build a bit of stability, is to work the first few rounds as rows, to work them flat. Let's say we're doing the same thing as our last example where we need to knit in front and back into every one of those stitches. We would turn our work. This is the wrong side facing us now. So you need to remember when doing this that you are going to have wrong side rows and right side rows. So you'll need to flip the directions of the pattern. If the direction said knit one, knit front and back, you would instead purl front and back, purl one, because you're working not just the opposite of the stitch, but in the opposite direction. So I've purled front and back across. We now have our 8 stitches. So now I could knit all the way across this. And now I could divide for knitting in the round. So I could put, I've got 8 stitches, so I will do half on the front, then divide the other set 2 and 2. If I was doing magic loop, I could just divide at this point. Now the thing about this method where you knit flat for a little bit and then switch into the round, so at the end of all of this you will need to seam this little section. So rather than being knit in the round, you have an open gap here that you will need to use your cast on end, and you will just seam across that little short step. But the advantage of doing this, just like with the I-cord, is that you have a bit of fabric built up that will now hold your needles better for you and help you. This next thing is just more of a reminder when distributing the needles for knitting in the round for DPN users. So when you go to divide up your stitches onto all of your different needles, it is really easy in this step to accidentally flip a needle, to kind of like go and somehow it flips, and then you've twisted your stitch and the back is now facing the front and that sort of thing. So my tip for you here is to always have a tray in your lap, or be working at a table if you are someone who's nervous about this step or who continuously struggles with this step, is to have something below you where you can place things down. So you would slide one stitch on to the next needle and place it down, because now this isn't going to flip around and turn your knitting on you and create a twist. The next stitch goes down and to the left, and then the last one just comes around, and then you've got your perfect little triangle all set up already. And so you just keep it on the ground, come around here and get that needle where you need, or the yarn where you need it to be to work your first stitch. And most of us like to tuck this needle underneath this one so that the working needle is lower on the left and higher on the right. And now that you've done all this, you can kind of pick it up and pinch it between your fingers or something like that. Get that first stitch knit and yourself sort of locked knitting in the round, and proceed from there. But you can see how much of a you can see that slipped right out. You can see how much of a struggle it is to have 3 stitches on the needles on DPNs and be trying to work, which is why I always work 3 stitches on the needles as I-cord, no matter how the pattern is written. If it's 5 or fewer stitches, I am absolutely working I-cord. If it's 8 or fewer, I'm usually working I-cord also. It is often DPN users instead of magic loop users, 2 circular method, or the Haya flips, flexi flips, or the Addy crazies. It's usually DPN knitters that struggle with this step more. So if you'd like to try one of these other methods, I have short videos on all 3 methods, and I will link to them down below. But DPN users, you can actually borrow something from Magic Loop until the stitch count gets too high. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say we have 8 stitches and we need to divide those for working in the round. We can work Magic Loop instead without the loop. So what that would mean is that we're going to divide the stitches 50-50 front and back. So 4 in the front, 4 in the back. Now I'm just going to fold these around. So I've got my tail coming off back here. I've got my working yarn is going to be the last stitch in the first round, the cast on. So the free side over here is going to be my first stitch. And now I'm going to work across these 4. Now, Magic Loop on DPNs really only works when there is a very low stitch count. Let me get the cross here and then I'll talk about why. In Magic Loop, we have the stitches split on the front and the back half actually rests on the cord, which loops to the left and to the right, kind of like a beautiful butterfly on either side of our work. While they're on the back here on the cord, they're very flexible, and this needle can kind of function independently of the stitches back here, which, like I said, are very flexible, and we can just work across them. When we are borrowing this technique for DPN users, the reason that we need very few stitches in the round is that we don't have the flex on the back half, and so what we need is the flexibility in terms of there are very few stitches, and so this front needle can have the ability to pivot. So it can be kind of like the letter X here, and we can work and still get to our stitches without getting in our own way. So you can work a few stitches in the round on just 2 DPNs, which is another great way to tackle a project with very few stitches on the needles. Remember, you're already good at knitting. You just need to find the tools and the method that you're best at for knitting these very few stitches in the round. If this is a new circumstance for you, it will feel a little awkward, but that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Just keep at it, keep trying different tricks, and don't blame yourself. You've got this. Happy knitting.
All right, so now that I know it's going to take a little while to download the Fringe beard video, I'm going to start doing that before I do anything else. So just give me a moment while I find that video. Okay, so that one is doing its download thing. So I'm really hoping that that video gave you some ideas for maybe some pain points and how to avoid those pain points. It is really interesting how a lot of things boil down to patience, good lighting, and then willingness to blame your materials rather than yourself. So it really is, you'll notice I use those not flexi flips, the zings I have used in the past in a lot of videos because they are the color plus the metal really shows up beautifully in videos, but they're so slippery. I don't actually like using them for gnomes at all. They really do they're heavy and they're slippery and they just fly out. You'll hear them clanging all the time if I'm knitting something in them that isn't like a sweater cuff or something like that. So the zings are fantastic, but they're not fantastic for gnomes. And I think that's one of the things that I think when we're beginner knitters, we think it's us, but sometimes it's the match. If you're trying to knit a super slick yarn plus super slick needles, and it's something that you're struggling with in terms of skill or stitch count or whatever, that confluence is too much. So some people switch to grippier needle methods or grippier needle materials or something like that. So there's lots of different ways to approach knitting very few stitches and the yarn combination. So really don't blame yourself. Practice, practice, practice. And if it still isn't getting better, blame your materials and switch things around. Like I mentioned in that video, I do have videos on how to do Magic Loop, the 2 circular method, and flexi flips. So if you are a DPN knitter and are interested in when I did the sort of like Magic Loop for DPNs, that's actually how flexi flips work, except they're not rigid in the middle. So rather than being 100% rigid, there's a short cord between them. So you put your stitches on 2 needles and you're knitting off a third one. So it's kind of like halfway between DPNs and magic loop. So magic loop people, if you're struggling with all the big cords and you're not liking how often you're having to do cord management and things like that with gnomes, flexi flips are halfway to DPNs. So for both DPN knitters and magic loop knitters, you may find the flexi flips are like a really happy medium between for you for gnomes. I know a lot of people are really excited about the flexi flips options. They're not cheap, so if you can, see if you can borrow them from a friend, or if a yarn store will let you like literally sit down, very carefully open the package and just knit a little bit to see. But I do have a video on that if that sounded interesting to you. I'm just going to check chat to see if there are questions or comments. And I think we're ready to do our next video. Juliet, the DPN demo is sheer pain and terror. Yeah, it's especially with 3 stitches. It is no fun. And that's why I keep filming these videos over and over again. I went back and forth with my editor about whether or not we describe knitting the nose as starting off with I-cord, because I knit the first step of this nose, the first couple steps in I-cord every single time, but it was going to make it seem less accessible to new knitters. Look intimidating, even though it's hard. I don't know how to describe this. Anyways, we went back and forth on this, and I eventually decided to just try to point out this video over and over and over again. I don't know if I do it differently now, but yeah. Just checking. Oh yeah, and changing the length of your DPNs is important too, because there are longer ones. I mean, it used to be that Norwegian sweaters were knit in the round on long circulars, but there are also shorter ones and shorter ones, and there are some very short ones. And those are too short for the way my hands hold needles, but there are some really tiny DPNs that people sometimes use for gloves. And I mean, gnomes and gloves are very similar in terms of their stitch count, so that's something to think about. Okay, looks like people are just talking about what they're comfortable with and what works for them, which is great. Don't stop talking in chat. It's really useful for people to see what is working for people, or what even just for me to know that most people are doing X rather than Y. Knowing the population demographics for approaches helps me too. But since there's no questions, and I don't see anybody asking questions up with their electronic hands, we'll go right into the Fringe beard tutorial. So I'm going to point out that the beard in this gnome says K2TBL. And if you Google this, for some reason, this is listed as a decrease. But if you look at the way the decreases are all of our abbreviations are done in the book, and you'll notice that it's not listed as an abbreviation. We just define TBL as through the back loop. And you'll notice that in my patterns, I always signal decreases and increases by noting stitch count. So if you've got a row that just says like purl 2, knit 2, I won't then say dash, this is the stitch count, because we haven't changed the stitch count. But any round where we change the stitch count, or row where we change the stitch count, I actually tell you how many stitches. And so it's always signposted by stitch count changes for me and my patterns. And in the beard, there is no stitch count change because we just cast on and do the same thing the whole way. It's just a little strip of fabric, which you will see. But this is a question I've been getting a lot lately again, and apparently there are decreases on YouTube and other places where K2 TBL is listed as a, but it's not K2 together TBL. Anyways, the fact that there are no standard abbreviations across everything, there's some pretty standard ones like K for knit, but other than that, things can get a little scary or dodgy. So it's really important to always look at what the designer's abbreviations mean. And you'll notice in my abbreviations, I don't have that as an abbreviation or listed as a decrease or anything like that. The question is how to make the curly beards. So actually this one will talk a little bit about that, Paula, because it's the exact same beard. And if you look at the book, there's it's listed as like what is it? Short and straight versus wide and curly. The technique is the same. And if it doesn't cover this in the video, then I'll come back and talk about it. But if I'm going to say the same thing in a moment when I share the video, I might as well not say it. So we'll move to that. And hopefully I do say it in the video. So here we go.
Let's talk about the Fringe beard from the Gnomes of Grimblewood. So this beard is the narrow version. The small and straight is what it's called in the book. There is also a wide and curly. The wide and curly will have more stitches on it, but the process will be the same. So what I've done is I have cast on the number of stitches in the pattern and I've worked it. I have attached a removable stitch marker on the side of the beard where I'm always going to be doing the knit through the back loop stitches. So this is a flag for me. If this is on the side where I'm knitting, that's where I'm doing the knit two togethers. So what you want to be doing is you want to have the same column.
I'm just going to stop and say, I can't believe I just said I do the knit two togethers. That is so irritating. I've never noticed that in that video. It is not a knit two together. I may have to edit this video and repost it. Okay, so don't listen to what I said there. Listen to what I'm saying now. Sorry about that.
Column of stitches where those two stitches are knit through the back loop. That twists them and tightens them up so that when we drop and fringe this, this does not kind of open up and go all gappy. So by putting a removable stitch marker, it becomes a little more clear which ones are the ones we're supposed to knit through the back loop. If you've done the long tail cast on as suggested, it will also be, the end will also be on that side. So since I am on the right side and this is on this side, this means I will start by knitting two through the back loop. So I will just do that. The beard is done on sort of regular size needles, but holding the yarn doubled. So it is going to be very tight. All right, so to knit through the back loop, rather than going through the front and going tip to tip like this, we're gonna go tip across tip and go through the back of that loop, knitting each one of these first two stitches through the back loop. Then we knit the rest of the row normally. All right, then we turn. Our removable stitch marker isn't on the same side as the first two stitches. So that means that these first two stitches are our knit normally. So knit normally. Now I'm at the side, I'm at the two stitches there that are going to be knit through the back loop. So I'm going to do that again. And now we are at the final bit of this beard. So what do we do to finish this off? So I keep it like this, I don't turn it. The removable stitch marker is still going to be on my left side of my work. I'm going to cut this. I can leave it nice and long in case I want to use this side to attach. I'm on the wrong side of the work. The removable stitch marker is on my left, and I'm going to take my left needle tip. I'm going to skip the first stitch on the needle. I'm going to grab the second one, making sure to grab both legs of, or both strands of that stitch. I'm going to pull it up and over like a bind off. Okay, so now we have sort of bound off one stitch. We're going to take the left needle tip, we'll go through this stitch, and we're going to pull on that yarn, and we'll pull, 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 and fasten it off. So now these two stitches, the stitches that we knit through the back loop all the way, they are secure. They're not going anywhere. So now we pull our needle out of these last ones, because these are the ones we want to drop down and go all fringy. So what we want to be doing is we want to be dropping these stitches down. And so I like to not go where the loops are, but between the two loops. There's like a little flat bit between, and if I tug on that, they usually pop out nice and easily. All right, so we pull on this, and it's really important that we pull all the way to the last bit of those stitches, especially on the wide and curly one. If you don't get every last bit of both strands of yarn popped out, it'll start to feel like you're knotting and you can't figure out what's going on. So always make sure that as you're doing and you're pulling these stitches apart, that you are, I'm going to go to the other side, it's easier. All right, so I'm just going to pull down and go all the way. So pull down, go through, pull down, go through. And that I can tell I'm going all the way to the end, and that's just going to open these up. Now we've knit this double-stranded so that we've got more beard hairs. This is a really fun beard to try with different kinds of yarn, like mohair or boucle, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like a novelty yarn. However, the more textured the yarn, the more difficult it is to actually get it to drop down and go through these last bits. So just be aware that you may have to be a little more patient with yourself. So this is what the short and straight version looks like. Obviously the wide and curly. The wide and curly, what you will have done is before you start dropping all those stitches down, so after you've secured that last stitch, you get the whole thing wet. You let it dry, and then when you go to drop the stitches down, the stitches will have dried in the shape of the crinkly ramen style noodles that come in the instant packages. And that's the difference between them. There's a few more stitches, a few more rows wide, and then you get it wet and then let it dry before actually doing the step where you fringe the beard. Hope this helps. Happy gnoming.
Okay, so I know that tutorial helps a lot of people. So hopefully that was like an aha moment for at least at least some of you. And I did talk about the curly beards. Yeah, there's a few more stitches cast on, and you always just keep that one side of the beard, no matter how many stitches you cast on for this technique, the 2 stitches on one side will always be knit through the back loop, and then all the other ones are just knit normally. And then you get that wet. You soak it, you dry it, and then that just sets it. Kind of like back in the olden days with the rag curls, when we used to go to sleep with our hair tied up. That was the same sort of thing, but this is for wool and yarn, which is sheep hair. So very similar technique. Okay, so we've made our nose because we did the 7 tips for very few stitches. Then we have made our beard. And so now at this point, all that's left is to sew on the beard and the nose, and then we are assembled. This is the least assembly gnome I've written so far. So let me just find the video on the assembly. I had started it partway through, or I had paused it partway through, and then I closed it thinking it was stopping our video from opening. So I'll have to fiddle around a moment to find where I am in that. But I think it was 3.5 minutes. So let me find. And yeah. Just a tiny bit back. There we go. All right. So I will now share my screen again, and we'll assemble, and then we'll ask questions. I hope someone will say something other than me, aside from reminding me that my sound isn't working. So let's see what we have. Put Gnoddy together, and here we go.
Let's assemble Gnoddy so that we can finish. I think Gnoddy's assembly video might be the fastest one I ever make. There's so little left to do. All we need to do with Gnoddy is attach the beard and the nose, and then we're done. It's a nice fast process. So we're going to flip the brim up, and we're going to be sewing the beard centered on the front here, up here under the top of the flap, top of the brim, so roughly there, and then we will sew the nose on, and then we get a little bit of a drape. Not a lot of a drape with this hat. The brim is not a very deep brim, but that is okay. I think it's just enough. We're going to thread the needle, which I do by folding the yarn over, pinching it, and then putting the eye right above that pinched spot, and as I open up my pinch, it just naturally pushes it up and in. All right, so it's possible that what we sew may be a little visible depending on how the hat ends up lying. So make sure to use the bumps on the garter section of the fringe beard here in order to hide your stitches. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go under a leg of or 2 legs of a stitch here at the corner, and then through the corner of the beard. And I always like to do that at least twice. Usually 4 times if it's going to be a toy. So that's twice because it won't be a toy. And then I'm going to actually come underneath again and then start going across the hat. Now, before I get too far, I want to put the brim back down and make sure that I am truly centered, and that if I have started in the wrong place, this is a good time to know it. So let's just have a look, and that does look good. So now I can use the bumps to hide things. So for instance, if I go down here and come up under the bump, that's one way to hide it. And then if I also come down before the bump, but what I'm doing is rather than coming down right where I came up, if I go down a little bit lower, then I can move over. Need to make sure that I'm scooping both beard and body. Sometimes it's really easy just to only grab the beard. So make sure you're grabbing some of the body. So wherever you come up, don't come back down in that same spot. Go either up or down a little, and just slowly move your way across, securing that beard down. Obviously, if yours is a decoration, you don't necessarily need to go every single stitch. You could start skipping a little bit and just get it attached enough that it's going to stay in place on a shelf or underneath a toadstool or on your front porch. I think Gnoddy would be a magnificent gnome made in a really bulky yarn, and then loaded up with something nice and heavy, and then greeting people around Christmas time on your doorstep. A little front porch Gnoddy. Oh, now that I've said that out loud, I think there's a bulky Gnoddy in my future. All right, so I've sewn it all the way across. I'm going to double check that it's centered, looking good. That's nice. So now I'm just going to secure my end. I'm going to come down over here, and I'm going to come over here underneath sort of the center of the beard, and I will just tie a little knot there and then hide the end in my sweater. I will say right now in this video, if you are not part of the knit-along that I filmed this for, I am assuming that Gnoddy is not going to be someone's first gnome, and so I have not done as much in terms of the videos, in terms of like really step by step showing you a lot of the details that I show in a lot of my other videos. But I am going to list in the description below a lot of those basic videos where I've covered a lot of those things, like how to block a gnome, how to attach beards. I'm going to do another beard attachment video. I'm going to do a video on how to stuff gnomes, all those sorts of things, where I do go in a lot more detail for people where it might be your first gnome. So that will be linked below. Okay, so now that I've buried the end, I'm going to snip it off. And now we're going to do the nose. And the nose in the book is always sort of done the same for these bigger, rounder noses. And by that, I mean, I like to secure it sort of top, middle, or middle, and then top, and then bottom, basically. We always start at the middle because that's where we start, because that's where the end is coming out, right? It's coming out midway. So what you can do is just find the center of your beard, boop, and then see if you like it. Oh, she looks really good with this one, with the those flying up like that, doesn't she, this one? All right, so I'm gonna go along the nose, kind of about 2 stitches wide, and then I'm gonna go back through the beard again, and I can do that again, and that's gonna provide a really stable attachment in the center. Then I'll tighten that up. And then I want to go and I want to attach that nose a little higher and a little lower. So to do a little higher, I'm going to roll the nose this way. I'm going to go through the top of the beard, just like that. And then I'll go through the nose. I don't want to go too high up because I don't want this to be visible, but I do want it to be sort of wide enough that it's going to be a nice stabilizing thing. Go back through the beard, right at the top here. I can go right back through the nose. And then when I tighten that up, it should pull it up. I'm losing my yarn there. Should pull that up nice and, oh, look at that. All right, now we want to bring our yarn down to the bottom. So I'm just going to go underneath the nose, come out here. And again, I'm going to use my thumb to roll it up. And I'm going to lose my yarn. Apparently, every video I have to lose my yarn minimum of one time. All right, so I obviously can't secure it to the fringe, but I can secure it down here. So I'm going to go through that. And then I'll go through the nose, beard, nose. And now I'll tighten that up. Nice and secure. If this is going to be a toy, I would probably also secure it to the left and to the right, just so that it's nice and firmly on there. Anything that's an appendage is something your kid's going to end up carrying it by, and we don't want the nose to come off. Because I feel like as soon as you put a nose on a gnome, it's truly a being with its own independent personality. So now to get rid of the end, I'm going to go underneath the beard, and I'm just going to tie a knot the same way I did for the beard itself. I am really losing my end. I thought I had more than enough set aside in terms of length, but I'm a little tense today, and I'm not always doing a great job of setting myself up for success as I'm doing this. All right, so I've tied a knot and just plunge that through the sweater, come out anywhere, and pull that tight and just snip it. It's not much to snip, but I do need to snip it. So there is our Gnoddy. Lots of fun to be had with this gnome. If you are interested in playing around with her, there are so many things to do. I'm not going to take the time to list them all, but I do usually leave this beard with the loops as loops, but you could come along, and before you attach it, I would do this, and I would, at the same point, you could snip it across. If you have a plied yarn, you could separate the plies sort of painstakingly bit by bit with a needle tip, or you get like a pet brush or something like that and fluff it up. If you try this with a textured yarn, it is an awful lot of fun. I really enjoy using boucle yarns or mohair yarns or other things for the beard. The beard texture is really fun in this one. So I hope that you've enjoyed making Gnoddy. I hope that the videos along the way helped you, and that you tag me when you post. Gnoddy, I would think, is one of my top 5 favorite gnomes. I can't go, maybe top 3. I don't know. It's so hard. I really enjoy adding stripes. When I add stripes, I do, in order to get an equal number of stripes, I have to add a little bit to the body. You can see in the book where this picture is, I list exactly what I've done to get the right stitch count here. And the reason I've gone with manual striping rather than self-striping yarn is so that the sleeve stripes could be identical, because obviously the circumference of the sleeves is different than the circumference of the body, and you would probably end up with almost all of one sleeve being one color rather than striped. So a little manual striping is what I've done here. So this is the DK, this is the fingering weight version. This is the first one I've done with variegated yarn. I knew that variegated yarn would be fun in a little gnome sweater, and so I wanted to show that off. So now I've done Gnoddy in a single yarn, applied yarn, a DK weight yarn that's woolen spun, and now my next thing is to do her, I guess, in a bulky weight. Happy gnoming and have a great time.
Okay, I've actually been digging around in my bulky weight yarn stash and really frustrated with my options. So I don't know if I'll be knitting from stash, but there is definitely a bigger Gnoddy on the horizon for me. I will say, when you are changing your yarn size for the gnomes, just like you do in the book when you go up for DK, you keep the stitch counts. Everything stays the same for the directions. You just have to use a different yarn size and a different needle size. And I always start by going down 2 sizes from the ball band recommendation. If you are a loose knitter, you may already be going down 1 or 2 sizes from the ball band, so you would then go down 2 sizes from whatever it is you would normally knit that yarn at. And if you are a tight knitter, you could probably just stick at the ball band recommendations. Knit a little bit of your fabric, see what happens if you stuff it. And if it stuffs great, then it's probably, it's not so, you don't want it to be loose and gapey, and so that the stuffing shows through the holes. All right. All right. Let me have a look. When you get done, can you show me where to pull the loops out again? I will just link the video, and then you can watch that a couple times. If you do it from the right side, I find that that beard is a little harder to drop, but if you flip it over and you're pulling from the wrong side, it will be usually simpler. And Diane, so hopefully I'll give you that link in chat right now. I'll link all the videos that I'm talking about here. And the ones that I just played for you are not yet public on YouTube, but I will make them public once we're done here. So, oh, that's not what I'm trying to open for myself. Hang on, where's my list of links for you guys? All right, so the first thing I'm going to link is the worsted weight version of picking up stitches. This one, like I said, is for the hat. In the video itself, I'll talk about picking up from the hat, but it will be the same as picking up for the body, but not done in fingering weight and not on a variegated. So the stitches themselves will be a little easier to see. So that is this one. And then here are the ones for stuffing, blocking, and dealing with ends. And then where's my link here for, where am I here? Let's find the fringe beard. So Diane, that'll be the one for you to go back and look at and just sort of, then you can watch it again and again. And then what else did I show? The 7 tips. There we go. I'll get that link for you guys as well here. And then that'll be all the links for videos. And lastly, I will also again link the form for entering. So the form for entering will let you either link a Ravelry project page or an Instagram post. And that's just your proof that you finished. And so you'll need to put in your email, you'll put in the link to either the Instagram post or the Ravelry project post. And there's little directions in there for how to do either option. And then I don't even think there's any other questions. It's basically so that I can email you and say, hey, you won. That does mean that starting next Sunday, after the Zoom is over, you will need to keep an eye on both your inbox and your junk mail because filters be crazy, yo. But it will also email you a copy of your form. So when you put your email in and then you add those links and things, you should get a copy emailed to you that you've entered the form. And that will be proof to you that I know that you entered, basically that you are in the form. If you don't get that, again, check your junk mail filter, especially those of you on Gmail. Gmail tends to filter a lot of things, whether they're newsletters or sign up things or whatever, to a special tab called promotions and social. And if you don't know that Gmail has tabs hidden in your inbox, it can be really hard for you to figure out where things are going and why you're not getting emails you think you're signed up for. So just be aware that that is one of the things that can happen for you. Are there any questions at this point? Feel free to raise your hand electronically, either tap your screen or move your mouse around, find the react or reaction thing, and then when you click or tap on that, there should be a raise hand. You can also type it in chat or unmute and just talk because it doesn't seem like that's happening. Okay, so Gwen, I'll get to your question in a moment. I'll just wait for gnome questions first. just in case. Well, I mean, ask if you have one. I'll stall for a moment. I'm hoping it's just a compliment that I did a good job of writing the patterns and filming the videos and that everyone is satisfied. That would be great. So while I'm sort of stalling in case someone is typing, Gwen asked, can I ask a question about your upcoming Rowan Connect class? Will the exercises work if I don't have the paint sample cards, but have pencil crayons and a variety of yarn colors? Yeah, so that class had a materials list that was like, okay, so we're not together in person. Here are some ideas, and if you could have at least one way to play with colors. So as long as you have one way, Gwen, you'll be fine. I'm gonna preview a little bit some ways to play online with colors, and there's gonna be 2 websites that are linked in that supply list that I will demonstrate how to use them so that you can also play with colors that way. So it's gonna be a 2-hour class. Because it's online, we don't do the full 3 hours because we're not literally in person able to use yarn and play with it quite as physically. So we don't need as much time for the exercises right then because we'll teach you the framework, we'll do everything with the color choice approach. And then you'll play a little bit, but then you'll basically just go off into your life and hopefully find ways to play in person on your own. So any one method of ability to play with colors is needed, but it sounds like you've got 2, so that's great. So it looks like people are confirming that I've been helpful and that's why they don't have questions and not that they're just not asking. But again, if you do have a question, please, please ask. I often learn so much from the points where people are asking questions, and it helps me write the patterns better in the future, and it helps me make better videos. So I'm never offended by questions that are about clarity. When like those are just natural things, and I don't want anyone to now feel like embarrassed to ask me a question. Okay. If you do have a question about the entry form or any other things, the best place is to ask on Ravelry. The Ravelry group is full of people from around the world, so there will usually be someone awake no matter when you're asking. And gnome knitters are very, very motivated to help each other. So people actually really love it when people have a question so that they can answer. It makes them feel happy and friendly and just it's just this big circle of questions and answers and feeling good and getting more information. And also, I think it's great because people explain things in ways that I don't. And sometimes they're saying the exact same thing I'm saying it, but they're saying it differently, and suddenly it clicks for a person. So the Ravelry group is the fastest way to get answers because you're not waiting for me to cycle back online. And also, it's just a great place to get a variety of answers because not everything is a yes or no kind of question. Sometimes it's like a 30 great options kind of question. So I'm probably not going to give you 30 great options. I might give you 3, but if you ask in a public place, you'll get more than 3. All right, so what's Corvax is, I'm new to the game, but what's next? So the next thing in terms of this knit along is to finish up your gnome, take a picture and put it on your project page or put it on Instagram, and don't put it in Instagram stories because stories disappear after 24 hours. So if I follow your link, it will just be Instagram telling me, I'm sorry, this post is not available. So you have to actually put it into your feed. So you have to post it rather than stories. And then that'll give you a link, and you'll either link to your Ravelry or to your Instagram, and you'll enter for prizes. Next week, same time, same so I was gonna say same bat time, same bat channel, like Batman, but it's not the same Zoom channel because it's a new meeting. But anyways, next week at noon, I will do a celebration meeting. We will all hopefully hold up Gnoddies and smile, and we will talk about what your choices are and the cool things you did to Gnoddy. We will see the people that put chickens on the sweater, for instance. Someone did an intarsia in the round to do different sweaters. Juliet, if you're here, you rock. We'll see that next week. I will give prizes away. And then in June, there is no formal knit along. We're doing the Year of Gnomes. And so any month in which you finish a gnome, you can enter for prizes in the Year of Gnomes prize draws. And those are also on Ravelry. The rules and explanation are all there, and you can also ask questions there for figuring things out. So that's sort of like June is just sort of like a free play month. Although every month for Year of Gnomes is sort of open. But in terms of planned things, in July, the theme of the month for people who like themes of the month, because again, you can choose to do anything you want, whether you knit a gnome or not. If you're knitting a gnome, you don't have to follow the theme. Like nobody had to knit Gnoddy this month for Year of Gnomes. But July is going to be Gnome for the holidays. So a lot of people do Christmas in July, or they start thinking about birthday presents or whatever for ahead of time. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be knitting tiny gnomes to make advent calendars for both of my children. So I will maybe hopefully be knitting 50 gnomes in July. Other people might be doing Halloween themed gnomes or whatever. And again, it's not necessary that you theme along in July, but that's the next point where we have a theme. There will be a mystery gnome in October. I also have two more surprise sort of patterns dropping soon. After I finished Professor Fungi, that one right there, I was like really inspired by mushroom-shaped gnomes, and I didn't want him to be the only one like that. So there's some more mushroom-shaped gnomes coming. And then, yeah, there's a December gnome, mystery gnome is coming along, but those are sort of the main things in terms of like more formal events. We might do another guided knit along at some point this year. But Gnoddy was our main book one for this year. Last year we did Nori from the book, the one with the pockets on the beard. And yeah, that's about where we're at. I'm gonna double check chat and then hopefully we're all good. All right.
I thought of a question, Sarah.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I'm just thinking people might be confused as to whether they're going to link, like, if they posted their pose in the Gnoddy thread, are they posting that link? Or are they going to
Oh.
post to their project page? Because I'm looking at the prize entry form and I'm just wondering if people might have that question because I thought of that question.
That is a great question. What do I say here? All right. Okay, confirmation link. Okay, so yeah, can I bold things? Let's see. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm some bolding things. And I mean, let's see. That'll hopefully update and be clearer. As long as people have linked to something where I can see that they've finished Gnoddy. For Gnoddy, we can be a little more loosey-goosey. It's the Year of Gnomes where I need things to be pretty standardized so that because we do have to go through the people that want to enter for the 12 gnomes in 12 months thing. We do need that to be a little more like, okay, can we see that all really happened? Whereas the Gnoddy,
Yeah, because
yeah.
there's been a lot of confusion about whether people are linking their project page link or they're linking back to the
Yeah.
post in the thread for that month. And so I'm expecting December is going to be interesting.
Yes.
But that's why I'm probably also wondering. So you don't care what people link to, either their project
I
page
really would
or
prefer
their
project page, and I've
okay.
updated the form to say that, but
Okay.
that's the nice thing for you as a moderator on Ravelry is you don't see any of this prize entry. When it's a Google form, it's all my mess to deal with. So I
Yeah,
will
that's why
yeah. Yeah.
I
So
want to try to make
ideally,
it
yeah,
easy
yeah,
for you.
definitely. And I'll go make sure that wherever I'm talking about this, that I've made sure to say project page for Ravelry, and hopefully I'll clear that up. But I will thank you, Mary Ellen, and I will wrap things up, it's board game weekend here in Manitoba. There's a board game convention, and I am hosting a game in 30 minutes. And so I have to get over to the place and get my teaching helmet on and get ready to teach people how to play a game. So we're gonna have a lot of fun next week in our celebration. In the meantime, have fun finishing your Gnoddy. I really can't wait to see how you work things out. I will post this within 24 hours, but not within the next 2 hours because I'm off to play a game. You guys have a great week, everybody. See ya.